Hey, and good morning. I am here with Omuugn today to talk to you about cheerfulness. This is a super exciting time for me simply because I've looked forward to this all week. Now, we are reading today from the Insights and Wisdom of Omuugn, and we are on pages 107 to 111 today. Now, cheerfulness. How does that fit in with all of our lives? Oh, what a great topic. Hello, and how are you today, Omuugn?
Well, it's a good day to be alive, so I'm doing well.
Well, thank you for joining us. Now, I got to start from the very top here and have you tell us what is cheerfulness?
Well, it's a really simple answer and a really complex answer. Um, just being happy, being lighthearted, being optimistic. Uh, if people look at you, they can tell if you're happy or sort of grumpy or neutral or whatever it is. In fact, they say that over 90% of our communication is nonverbal. And so sometimes we're so used to the way we live, we don't really know if we're cheerful or not. Uh, the way we live just seems sort of natural to us. And it's helpful, in fact, if you get feedback from other people, because the tone, the intonation of our voice, our body movements and postures, our general demeanor, whether we're smiling or not smiling or whatever, we're conveying to other people all of the time really what our personality and our attitude is. And sometimes we don't really realize how we impact other people or what we look like to others. So it's really a good idea to ask for particular feedback. For example, I can ask you, I've known you for a long time. Would you consider me to be a happy person or a frustrated, discouraged person, or what was your general impression of my demeanor while you were growing up?
Well, you were always really a lot of fun. And I appreciated the fact that you sang to us a lot as kids because there were times in our home where there was nothing particularly good or bad happening, but there would just be people that would break into song. And I was like, whoa, here goes another song. And so as an upbringing, you provided us a really happy upbringing to participate in. And you are a very stoic person. As long as I've known you, you've been very stoic and just very kind of contemplative and not in a bad or a sad way. It was always just kind of like he's thinking. But when you talked, you were always talking with, enthusiasm and hope and inspiration. And I remember as a little kid thinking to myself, you know what, he's very wise. And I thought, whenever he speaks, because he doesn't speak much, because you were very quiet growing up, but whenever he speaks, I better be taking notes because this is very wise. So I'm really delighted that after all these years, we do have the insights and wisdom of Omuugn, which I do want to share with you. If you guys have not got a copy, this is the book that we're going through right now. Now, as a child, I waited my entire life for this book because I loved reading. And this book breaks down characteristics like cheerfulness, one topic per week, and that's what we're discussing right now. So I consider you a very wise person, and wise that you brought happiness into our home. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Oh, good. Another aspect that we need to keep in mind pursuing this particular topic is that not all traits and characteristics that we have are isolated. They intertwine with each other like a tapestry. And so, if we're talking about cheerfulness, we're actually talking about several characteristics that intertwine that really make the fabric of who we are. Like patience and tolerance and empathy for other people. And there are all kinds of characteristics that make us cheerful. And so, if you were just trying to be cheerful all the time, for example, we live in a world where almost all of the news is very depressing.
Mm-hmm.
We have wars and crime and shoplifting and pollution and homelessness, and the economy is bad, and the political structure in our country is really quite unstable. And if we're not careful, we can be carried away into all of those things, and life takes on kind of a grim aspect. And so we need to introduce a new idea into the world. You know, Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world. So it's really important that we have a different demeanor than the world is trying to portray to us, because life really is kind of exciting and joyful, and we're surrounded by limitless possibilities. And we to a great extent, we still have free agency in our country. And so we can choose to be whatever we want to be, or learn whatever we want to learn. And we live in a day where the technology is mind-boggling. I think when I was a child, I just had a pencil and a piece of paper, and that was it. There weren't any, I never had a watch. I didn't have a calculator. There was no PDA, no smartphone. I mean, things were just really, really different when I was young. And now we're surrounded by such a massive amount of data that we have to be very selective in what we let into our world. If we're not, we can be overcome by the grimness of it all. And really, the purpose of our life is to enjoy our life, to be happy, to have happy families, and to get up in the morning and look forward to the day with anticipation and excitement. And so we need to design the life that we want to live. We need to ask ourselves the question, what kind of a person do I really want to be? How do I want to present myself to others? What am I going to think about when I'm by myself? Am I going to be sifting through all of this news that is grim? Or am I going to think about things that are really positive and optimistic? And for example, it's frustrating to see the corruption, for example, in our government. We know that it's rampant. Excuse me. We have elected officials who go in and they come out multi-millionaires. That goes way beyond their pay. And so we know that things are going on behind the scenes that are very questionable, to be polite. And so we need to introduce a new way of looking at things for ourselves. We need to say, I believe, for example, in justice. And maybe things are going on now that aren't the way they're supposed to be. But at some point in time, justice is going to win. The things that are true are going to manifest themselves. And people who choose to live a different lifestyle, the laws of karma will catch up to them at some point. So I think things are going to be okay. A lot of people want us to go into a war at this time. But I think a lot of people don't want us to go to war. I think a lot of people want us to live peaceful, happy lives. Usually wars are the leaders of nations, and it has nothing to do with the people that live in those countries. And so if the people in the countries stand up to their leaders and say, we don't want war, we want peace, we want love, we want an infusion of positive things into our lives, I think that people can really make a difference, and we can create a more positive outlook in the world that we live in. You
When
had
you speak
something to say.
about creating a positive world in your own space, I noticed that growing up, you always created some positivity for each individual person. And like, for example, my mom loves flowers. And growing up, you were always really big into plants, and you'd have hanging pots with plants, and they would be like beautiful flowers that would grow. And everywhere you looked, it would be like, oh, wow, look at that. Oh, wow, look at that. And there would just be these beautiful plants everywhere. And that was really not necessarily a noisy way of communicating, but just a really quiet, peaceful, beautiful way of saying, hey, I'm here to brighten your mood. Like everywhere you look, you're going to see a little bit of beauty with these bright colored plants that I'm willing to take care of for you. How did you discover that plants, for example, was a way to create cheerfulness in other people inside your home?
Well, that takes us into the idea, the principle of mindfulness. It's being mindful of the environment that you're in, first of all, where you look around and you say, is this the environment that I really want to live in? Or what could I do to make this environment more pleasing to me and my family? And so you begin to make positive changes, and you talk to people, you communicate, and you discern over time what people enjoy, what they like. And it's really nice if they like the same things that you do. Uh, Even today, I try to produce all of my own food that I can, but I still like to introduce flowers into the yard and palm trees. And I live in Oregon, in the northwestern part of the country, and yet I have 20 citrus trees, and I'm growing a pineapple, and I have some palm trees that I put out in my yard during the summer. Everything goes into my greenhouse in the winter, or it would not survive. But I try to mix the production of food with beauty, the beauty of nature, the beauty of flowers. It just makes life more interesting and enjoyable. I cannot tell you how many times this summer that I've just stopped in my yard and just looked at the individual flowers and say, you know, this is really a beautiful flower. And you just begin to look at the way nature creates things, and it's just being part of who you are. So you can create the environment that you want to live in, and you can interface with that environment any way you choose to. And I just think that life is more pleasant when it's happy, when you're surrounded by things that you think are beautiful and pleasing. And uh, I mean, life is just amazing. And so I'm very particular about the music that I listen to. We live in a day and age when you can find any kind of music that you want to listen to. And the reason that you want to listen to certain kinds of music, in my theory, is that that's kind of the frequency that you're vibrating on. And so if you are very selective in the music that you listen to, it changes your frequency. And there are actual resonant frequencies that are happy and uplifting. They're the solfeggio frequencies. And uh, there's the sacred geometry that goes through the dimensions, through worlds unseen, that we can tap into in different ways. And music is one of those ways. So, yeah, just creating the world that you want to live in and enjoying it, taking the time to sit down and asking yourself important questions, and then answering those questions. And like I say, you need to decide what kind of a person you want to be. And I would like to be an optimistic, happy person. And so even if I'm confronted with grim news, I want to see a good outcome. I'm optimistic that things will be resolved. Um, I look for good things in the news if I can find them. I look for stories of success. And Neil Ford is a person that I enjoy listening to. He has little short stories, and they're all positive. And there are people that just kind of motivate you and excite you, and they're pleasing to be around. I mean, let's face it. Who wants to live around a grump, a grouch, that every time you're around them, they're just they just take all of the wind out of your sails? We like to be around people that are positive and have positive energy to give to you and that encourage you. That's what makes life really interesting and fun for me.
Well, you were talking about music, and one of the things that I was keenly aware of is growing up, you would go work a full day at work, and sometimes you even worked a double shift. And I know how tired you were when you got home. And then when we would go to bed at night, in spite of how tired you were, it would have been so easy to just say, look, I'm so tired. I worked a double shift. I'm going in, I'm going to bed. Y'all be quiet. But instead, you grabbed your accordion and you came in and you would play songs for us while we would go to sleep at night. And I just remember countless times you playing the guitar and the accordion and just playing happy music for us as we went to sleep at night. And I remember hour after hour going, oh my goodness, this is awesome. And I never wanted to fall asleep because I wanted to hear the happy music. And I think eventually you would maybe play soft songs that would then make us go to sleep or something. But I just remember so many happy nights of us going to bed listening to you singing and playing music. So how did you discover that that was a way to keep your entire family happy and as a way to cap out the night?
Well, there are things that people enjoy, and that's what makes them happy. We tried to take the time to go down to parks and play ball together. Everything we did as a family, we did together. And if somebody didn't really like to play ball, that was okay. They had to learn to be with the family and to appreciate different things. So we introduced games, and we went on a lot of walks together as a family. We would walk at night in the moonlight, and the little tiny babies we would put in a wagon and pull them along. We walked through cemeteries. We walked sometimes during the day. We would go to college campuses and walk around the campus and see beautiful things and things that were going on in the world. And we played a lot of games together. We spent a lot of time popping popcorn and telling stories. We didn't use a lot of television. Television was available in your time, but we limited television to like one night a week, like on Friday nights. You could watch television programs. Things like Little House on the Prairie. We were very selective in what you watched. I think when I went to meetings and things, you would watch Knight Rider and some of the other programs that were maybe questionable at the time. But but
In
we
fact, I have to
introduced.
interrupt you for a second and say that's true. We watched Knight Rider and Chips Patrol. Now I'm dating myself, but these are the shows that were on TV at the time. And we lived at the top of the hill and we would keep guard at the top of the hill. And we lived so far out in the country that when we would see some headlights coming up the hill, somebody would sound the alarm and say, hey, there's headlights are coming up the hill, we think it's mom and dad coming home. And we would have somebody turn out the lights, everybody would race to bed, like we'd all be in our pajamas ready to go to bed, and we would hurry and get in bed and turn out the lights by the time the car pulled in hopes that, I don't know, I think we thought that you guys were not smart enough to see the lights on from a distance. I don't know what we were thinking, but then we would all fake asleep by the time you got home because we knew we weren't supposed to be watching the shows.
Yeah, I did that in my youth also, but my mom would come in and feel the television to see if it was warm.
Uh,
Yeah, parents are tricky. But one of the things that we did that was meaningful is that we had a structure in our life. For example, we had jobs that everyone was assigned a job every week. We had inspections, and we just part of our culture was that you learn to work and you learn to work hard and you learn to do quality work. And yet we tried to make that work enjoyable. Uh, Everything you do should be fun. If you have a job that you don't like to do, like maybe you don't like to do dishes, you should work on that so that you enjoy doing dishes. You should appreciate water. There are countries where the people have to pack their water for 3 or 4 miles to get any water into their home. And we just had running water in our home. What a blessing that is. And we had dish soap to wash the dishes in. And our fingers work and our hands worked. And I mean, there's so many blessings everywhere you turn that no matter what you're doing, you can find all kinds of positive ways to look at it. So the idea is to enjoy what you do. And if you don't like to do something, either don't do it or enjoy doing it. There's just no middle ground. If you're going to do something, for example, I don't know how many times over the years I've heard people say that they hated to go to work.
mhm.
They hated Monday to come because they had a whole week of work in front of them. And they grumbled all during the days while they were at work. And it was just miserable to be around those people. If you're going to do something, if you have to do something, make it enjoyable. Make it the best experience that you can, and project that cheerful attitude, that optimism into everything you do. It just makes life worth living.
Along that same thought, because I agree with you 100%. When I was in my probably 20s, I came across a book that was written by George Walther, and it was called Power Talking. And one of the things that I learned from that book that really changed my outlook, especially on my job, because like you said, it's easy to say, I hate my job, was instead of saying, I have to go to work today, he replaced the word have to with get to. I get to go to work today. And I started changing just a couple little words here and there. And one of those words that I would change is but. Instead of saying but, you change the word with and. Well, I would love to spend time to you today with you today, Dad, but, and then there's some kind of an excuse. But if you say, I'd love to spend time with you, and then you have to say, and I can do that on Saturday. And you end up thinking in different terms. And so when we talk about just creating a world that we want to live in, a lot of it is how we think and how we are actually talking, the words that we're actually using, and just changing the words have to get to. I know in our company right now, we use that all the time. We don't say the words, I have to do this, I have to do that. I get to do a show today or whatever it is. It completely changes the outlook.
Now, we need to be aware of our self-talk. Sometimes we try to be cheerful and happy, but our self-talk is really kind of discouraging and pessimistic. So again, that takes us back to mindfulness. We need to be aware of how we talk. And sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, we're not aware of the intonation of our voice. And so maybe we feel happy, but the way other people hear us is more stern or negative, or maybe they think we're judging them. Uh, we don't know how we affect other people unless we ask them. And so we need to really kind of be aware of how our presence is being portrayed in our habitual way of living. Uh, so it's really interesting to look at yourself under a microscope and really analyze your characteristics. That was the point of the whole book, was to take each one of the traits and isolate it. And instead of just living kind of on the surface of everything, to drill down on the traits and look at what they're made of and how you would be changed if you lived the optimal trait. If all of the characteristics that we manifest as human beings, I came up with 158. If we were living as we should live in all of those areas, we would have really developed social skills, and we would have really developed cheerfulness and really developed tolerance and all of the different attributes. But we need to really look at ourselves and hold ourselves to the fire. We need to be accountable to ourselves as well as other people that live around us on what our demeanor is. So,
When we talk about demeanor, and I'm glad you brought that up, I have a sister, my oldest sister, Yolanda. You know her well. She has a notorious habit. I think if she's famous for one thing, it's breaking into song at the most inappropriate times. So if you're stressed out and if you're having a really hard day and if you just think the world is going to collapse on you and you happen to run into Yolanda, she will. I don't know why and I don't know where she gets them from, but they're theme songs from movies, they're songs from church, they're songs that she just made up. They're out of key, sometimes they're long, sometimes they're short, sometimes they rhyme. It really doesn't matter. I don't think she has any special rules, but she'll just break out into a song and she'll start dancing and, adding flourishes with it, and you can't help but starting to laugh. I mean, she can change anybody's mood from being kind of sour to being sweet. And then you have to laugh and just think that was the most absurd thing. And it really breaks your concentration of, I was so mad and now I'm laughing because this is so absurd. And she's famous for that. I can't, I think of her 2 or 3 times a day. I can't stop thinking about all the times she just breaks out into song. And sometimes I do that by myself to break a bad mood. And I always think of her. I think, I just pulled a Yolanda.
well, being cheerful, part of that is laughing. Uh, life is generally pretty serious, but you need to learn to laugh.
Mhm.
Someone said, if you're going to laugh at something in the future, you might as well laugh about it now. And that's true. The reason weren't here last week was because I took 8 of my sons and we went to Montana and we visited all the places where we lived in Montana. And the whole time that we were there wasn't one argument. And we have some really different belief systems in our family. And everyone got along with each other really, really well. Some of the brothers hadn't visited with each other in a long period of time. Some are not really good communicators as far as calling people on the phone and keeping themselves updated. But I saw some of the sons walking around a pond visiting, and somewhere in the lawn, there was a swing on the porch, and there was a balcony up above the game room where we were staying. And they got together, and all of the memories were enjoyable. I saw them laughing. I saw them kind of reviewing the positive things that they experienced in the different places where we had lived and growing up together. And it was just a really, really positive week that we spent together. And so we need to learn to laugh. We need to think about the good things that have happened to us in our lives, the interfaces that we've had with our siblings and our aunts and uncles and different people. And it's good to think about the positive things that people did for us and around us and to us, even. Uh, yeah, the way we look at things creates the atmosphere. We can look at things any way we choose to look at them. And I know a lot of people growing up, they haven't had good experiences. A lot of people come from a lot of slum areas, and maybe their family wasn't ideal or whatever. So we have to create in our own consciousness what we want to remember. Uh, it's kind of been proven scientifically that your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between a real experience and an imagined one. So if you have an experience that was very dis, distasteful for you, something that you really did not enjoy, go back to that experience and create it in the way that you would like it to be.
And when you say create it, do you mean in terms of like what you just said a couple minutes ago, where when you're talking about instead of like, oh, as a kid, I always had to wash dishes and I really hated that, to saying when I was a kid and I was washing dishes, I had soap and I had running water and I had hands and I was tall enough to stand up at the sink. And thank goodness there were dishes to wash, that I had food in my house that created this meal that then left dirty dishes and things like that, where you're looking at it from slightly a different perspective instead of just making stuff up.
Well, I think it's okay to make stuff up even. If you if you see yourself doing dishes as a kid, see yourself singing, see yourself being really happy while you're doing the dishes. Change the scene to what you want it to have been, and put that into your subconscious mind. Maybe that's what my kids did and shared with me while I was in Montana with them. I don't know. But all of the things that they did were really positive, and we laughed a lot. And so we need to put into our subconscious mind what we want to remember. We want to see life in a positive aspect. Uh, Surely take things and make them positive if you can. If you can't, then create something that's positive that you will want to remember.
And I think that's important because you talk about in your mind, visualize how things can be. And I know that for me, one of the things that we do, because I'm in the house cleaning industry and I train a lot of house cleaners that are by themselves all day, every day, and they have a tendency to, I don't know, focus on negativity or something bad happened to them, and they walk through these scenarios over and over and over again in their minds. And along with that, they come up with these sad stories of I'm not enough or I'm not good enough or whatever. And they just keep repeating that over and over in their head. So one of the things that we did is, because we're house cleaners and we're going through people's homes all day, every day, every time you pass a mirror, stop and look at yourself in the mirror and give that person a smile and a thumbs up. Like, hey, you matter. I'm rooting for you today. Because every time you see your own face and that person is smiling back at you like, hey, it's going to be all right, it kind of changes the way that you feel. And when you have to go back into the next room, instead of going back to being grumpy and furrowing the eyebrows and being miserable again, you were just like, hey, wait a second, I have my back, right? And it's that same thing in real time, recreating in real time those moments. And I don't mean to be neurotic or anything, but now every time I walk past a mirror, I'm like, I got you, pal. I got you. I'm on your side. Even at my own house, like, don't tell anyone. It's kind of weird, but yeah, it works.
Well, you brought up a point, sort of, and we need to amplify it just a little bit. It's easier to be cheerful. It's easier to be happy. It's easier to be optimistic if you feel well.
Hmm.
And in the society in which we live today, there's so many things that are being promoted that are not healthy. They have introduced, for example, high fructose corn syrup into almost everything. If you buy processed foods, they're full of sugar and full of salt, sodium, and there are things that are really not healthful for you. And so, after years and years of eating that kind of a diet, you really don't feel very well. And if you don't feel very well, it's hard to be really optimistic and cheerful. So, the healthier we are, the happier we are. And they've proven that if you're really a happy person, that if you do have a problem, you heal more quickly. You get better faster. And so we need to take the time to take care of ourselves. We need to really look with scrutiny at our diet. How much do we eat? When do we eat? And what is the quality of our food? When I was young, there were many, many family farms, and society has kind of moved into the big agribusiness where our food comes to us now from many, many different places. And the way they fertilize, the way they use sprays, herbicides, and things are different today than they used to be. And so, if you're going to really take care of your health, you need to know what you're eating. You need to, for example, if you can shop at a farmer's market, you're 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 better off if you know how the farmer raised the food. A lot of the farmers are organic farmers who do farmers markets. Usually, the big agribusinesses they don't specialize in farmers markets because that takes that personal touch and it takes a lot of commitment. They just ship to big stores and get it over with, and they have to ship stuff picked unripe so that it doesn't spoil on the shelves, and it goes through all kinds of processes that we don't really enjoy or that are good for us. So if you can grow your own food, if you grow your own food, you know what you're eating, you know what the soil is. I make all of my own soil. I have big compost bins full of redworms, and all of my scraps and prunings go into these big bins, and the redworms feast on all of that, and then I grow my crops in that compost. And I know what's in there. In fact, I introduce things into my compost like zeolite, which is a, a powder product that's mined in Utah, but it's full of all of the mineral content that you should have in your body. It's introduced into the soil. There's another product called azomite, which is another powder that you put into the soil that has all of the minerals in it. When you use salt, if you use Himalayan salt or real salt or natural salt that hasn't been highly processed to have non-caking agents put into it and aluminum and all kinds of things, you're going to be healthier. You're just going to be happier. I don't know if you remember, but when you were growing up, buying candy and things like that was not really one of our practices.
Oh,
We tried.
it wasn't actually allowed at all. We would, if we got caught buying candy or something, that was not cool.
Well, we used to grind our own wheat, and back in those days, the wheat was not genetically modified. In fact, even today, I have a neighbor. We grow our own wheat, and we know what we're eating. In fact, the last wheat that we grew is called King Tut wheat. Its origin was the pyramids in Egypt, and the kernels of the wheat are so large that they won't fit in my wheat grinder.
Mm.
And so I have to blend the wheat in my high speed blender to get the grains small enough that I can put them in my wheat grinder to grind the wheat. But I know exactly what I'm eating. And so I try to not use any herbicides or poisonous things in my garden, in my yard. I even enjoy cutting into a wormy apple once in a while. I cut the worm out, but I know it's really organic because the worm looks really happy. And but you
Well,
need to be.
it's interesting because I am going through a burnout series right now for content creator burnout. And we're doing 6 live shows a week, and we produce 6 podcasts a day and 6 blogs a day. And we've got a lot of content that we're creating on a day-to-day basis. And in the process of doing the Recovery from Burnout series, one of the things that we're focusing on, and this goes right back to what you just said, what is it that you're eating? Because if it's happening inside here, it's going to come out in the content that you create. And one of the rules that we have going through the recovery process is no canned, bagged, or boxed foods, because that's all full of preservatives. In order for it to be canned, boxed, or bagged, it's all preservatives. And so when you talk about what did the earth give us, we're going right back to what you're talking about, you're finding at the farmer's market. And I love that because we need to get back to a place where there are less preservatives and less. I can't even pronounce some of the stuff that's in the food that we eat. And so if I can't pronounce it, how do I know what it is and how do I know if it's good for me? And when I do research on, like, you grab one of those ingredients and you throw it into the Google search and you say, is this good for me? Oh my goodness, there's just documentation after pages of stuff that's like, don't eat this. This is what this is used for. And yet there it is in our food. And there are traces of all kinds of stuff, from turpentine to formaldehyde and all kinds of stuff that you would never expect would be in something that would be considered edible.
Some of the things that we use, like the red that we dye a lot of our foods with, has been outlawed in other countries. It's
Mm.
it's it's deleterious to our health. So yeah, we just need to train ourselves, and it's really important for children. Children sort of like the food that they grew up on, whatever it might be.
Mhm.
If you grew up eating ramen noodles, that'll be one of your favorite foods all through your life. But if you grow up eating broccoli and cauliflower and parsnips and some of the different foods, I was visiting one of your siblings uh, back east, and they worked for a fellow who prepared dinner for us and invited us over for dinner. And he made us a soup, and he had introduced parsnips into that soup, and it's such a unique flavor that I complimented him. I mean, I don't know everything that he put into the soup, but I said that parsnip flavor really adds a dimension to the soup that's really satisfying. And he was pleased that I could identify the parsnip in the soup. But if we learn to like the things that are good for us, if that's what we serve to our kids, that will be the food that they will eat throughout their lives. If your kids grow up eating candy and drinking soda pop and eating donuts and all the things that they shouldn't, that's what they'll eat until their health breaks down at some point. So they say that being really, really healthy is is dying at the slowest rate that you possibly can. So maybe that's a good idea to keep in mind.
Well,
One
but it
one
ties right back in with what we're talking about today, which is your attitude. And I think how you feel, because it's a really strong message. How you feel is how you interpret the world. And it has everything to do with if you are feeling in pain and you are miserable and your joints are inflamed and you've eaten the wrong things and it's triggered this whole series of unhappiness in your body, that's how you're going to see the world, is this in a state of unhappiness. I have a relative, and I won't say any names, but she's one of the most miserable people on planet Earth. And every time you say, hi, how are you doing? You better be prepared for a whole barrage of complaints that are just going to come at you at rapid fire, because that's how she sees the world. She's so unhealthy that everything is in pain and it aches and it's full of, all kinds of just misery. And then I've had to consciously ask different questions. Instead of saying, how are you today? Saying, oh, look, you have new hair. Oh, yes, I just went to the hairstylist. Okay, great. We can focus on something positive, right? But I cannot and will not ask, like, hi, how are you doing? Because there's never going to be a good answer. It's just not going to happen. So I think that goes back to what you eat and what you consume and what you drink is how you're going to feel. And that's how you're going to see the world. And that's going to affect your attitude, which I think is a really, really key issue.
Well, it is. And that's why I bring it up, is that if you want to be cheerful, if that's one of your objectives, it's just a lot easier and better if you're healthy. And so, how we take care of ourselves is an important aspect of how we project ourselves to the world. And another one is the people that surround us. If you want to be really cheerful and happy, being around a bunch of grumpy people is not conducive to that. And so, you should have people that you can interact with who are energetic, lively, optimistic people. You want to associate with the kind of people that you want to be. And so they say that if you pick someone's 5 closest friends, you pretty well will know how they're going to act and respond to things, because we kind of take on the characteristics of the people that we interact with all of the time. So definitely choose people that are cheerful and positive and optimistic to interact with. That really facilitates it. And
as you bring that up, there's a poem in your book that I was hoping you would read for us today. And I want to preface this by saying that Omuugn has written a lot of songs and a lot of poems, and actually a lot of children's books. And he has a new children's book that's coming out right now. And I want you to tell us about that as soon as you read us this poem. But this was such a great one that I didn't want this one to slip by. Can you share that with us?
well, I suppose I can. With a skip in our step and a song in our heart, being cheerful is a great way to start. A smile on your face, a twinkle in your eye, brightens the world as you pass by. A cheerful demeanor, a contagious delight, lifting the spirits of those in sight. Being cheerful, a simple yet powerful act, brings joy and happiness. That's a fact. Smile and laugh and spread some joy. Be a light that others enjoy. For a cheerful and good natured soul makes the world feel complete and whole.
Yay. In fact, that reminds me, I have to give that a happy bell. The happy bell is something that we introduced in our office, and it is something along the lines here where you're talking about making a joy and delight of everything that you do and a skip in your step. We're a business. There's a lot of stress. There are a lot of deadlines. And one of the things that we did, it was simple, it was cheap, and it was non-sugar related. And that was the Happy Bell. It costs about $3.50 for these little Happy Bells. We have them in all different colors. We have them scattered throughout the entire house. Everybody in our office has one on their desk. And every time they want to celebrate something or they accomplish something or they learn something new, they hit that Happy Bell. And then in unison, it doesn't matter where you are in the house or what you're doing, everybody will hit their Happy Bells like, hooray for you. And so it's a really fun way to kind of keep that happiness going, even if there's not anything specifically fantastic happening. It's just a little moment of joy, So thank you for sharing that with us.
Well, that concept right there is important too, and that is we either react to things or we proact to things. And usually if we react to things, it's not the very best way that we could react. And for example, if you're frightened of a spider, when you see a spider, you will react in sort of a negative way. Or if you're walking down a hallway and you walk into a big cobweb, you will react maybe in a very negative way. Maybe you'll do a dance that you didn't know that you could do.
I will, yes.
But we should choose how we want to live. And so if you can sort of look at different scenarios, different circumstances, different challenges, different problems, and how should I react in this situation? What if my sink starts to leak, my kitchen sink? Or what if I have this problem? Or what if I discover a broken window or whatever it might be? How should I react in this situation? And it takes a lot of emotional maturity. It takes some intellectual maturity. One thing I've learned over the years is that people do not mature in different aspects of their life as they get older necessarily. So just because you're older doesn't mean that you're mature in many areas. A lot of people are emotionally immature. They just react to things in a sort of a negative way. So we need to create the control of our lives, that we respond to things the way we want to respond to things, the way we want to project ourselves to the world. Maybe you want others to see you dancing around in the hallway with the cobweb on your hair, but maybe you want to show restraint and however you want to comport yourself to others in every situation that you're in.
Well, and
So
that's interesting that because you talk about when you're surprised and you act out. And I know that in our house, and I think I got this from you because I never remember a time when you were dancing around and cussing or throwing things or violent or like something went out of whack or whatever. I never saw you do that. And that's a really weird thing because most people behave, they stub their toe and then they start cussing and hopping around or whatever. And in my home, when you stub your toe and you wish you could be hopping around cussing, we try to pull an Omuugn where it's like absolutely no expression on the face. And we, in very calm, neutral tones, say these exact words. I wish that didn't happen. And it makes everybody in the house kind of laugh and like, whoa, that must have been like something really severe that just happened because they completely controlled themselves. And they said, I wish that didn't happen. And that means something really bad just happened. So I think that's another way of being positive without dancing around and expressing oneself in enormous ways.
well, a secret that I learned a long time ago was that if you stub your toe, if you cussed and swore and caused a big scene, your toe really wouldn't feel any better. And so if you say something like, well, that didn't turn out very well, and you sit down and rub your toe, you'll probably have you'll have a better experience than if you swore and jumped around and made a big scene about it. But anyway, the
Well,
idea.
well, it's interesting, not to interrupt, but it's interesting because being a father of 19 kids, when you participated in stubbing your toe or whatever it was that may have happened, that's also setting an example for everybody that's in the room that's watching you. And how you behaved triggered how I behave in that same situation all these years later. And it's really interesting because we do take cues from our parents, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. And so if there had been cussing and fussing and all the things, maybe that's how I would respond today. So I'm gonna lead that one directly back to you.
Well, hopefully you respond well. The idea behind the whole thing is that we're not victims in life. We're really not victims. We sort of create the world that we want to live in. And you want to create a world that you enjoy, a world that makes you happy. You want to approach things optimistically. You want to be cheerful. You want to laugh a lot. You want to have the characteristics of a person who just fully enjoys life enjoys every day as it comes along. That's the whole essence of what this characteristic is about. And to do that, several things have to be in place. It's hard to be just cheerful and happy if, for example, if you watch horror movies all of the time, or if the entertainment that you enjoy is sort of on the dark side. Entertain yourself with something that's positive and uplifting. Eat good foods, socialize with good people, happy people, and kind of create the world that you want to live in. That's the whole essence of it.
When you talk about creating the world that you want to live in, I got word that you're working and closing on a book right now called The Giant. And as a child, I remember The Giant, and it was an amazing song that you created and is now turning into a children's book. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And the whole focus behind that is one of everything we've talked about today, creating the world that you want to live in.
Well, the essence of the book is that a little tiny child, 3 or 4 years old, was sort of discouraged because they were so little, and they really wanted to be a giant because they could see giants in their mind doing all of these things, lifting big, huge boulders and ripping trees out by the roots and doing magical things, sort of to speak. And so this child was kind of struggling with being who they were. But one day, this child was out playing in the sand, and they felt a little tickle in their hand, and they looked down, and there was this shiny black little beetle. And the child realized that to the beetle, he was a giant. And so he started to laugh, and this little beetle uh, stood up as tall as he could go, but he was only as big as the little boy's toe. And that made the boy giggle again. And so it was kind of a story about seeing things in perspective, that even though he was little, he was actually a giant to someone else or something else. And so we can look at life from a different perspective and and learn a lesson from it. So that was the basis of the story. And I got with your sister Jennifer, who's an incredible artist, and she's doing the artwork for the book, and she has done a magnificent job. So I'm kind of excited about that book coming out. It was a song written many, many years ago that's just coming out now into a book form. So showing you again that the possibilities around us are endless. I never imagined in a million years that this would be a published book available to everyone. But there you
Well,
go.
and I've watched over the last couple of years, and this is going back to the cheerfulness of life. I've watched over the last couple of years as you have taken the things that you've learned and the things that you've created, and you've caught up with technology, and you've said, "Hey, wait a second! I've got not one book, but I have multiple books that I've created over the years from the content that you've created and the things that you've learned and the songs that you've written and the stories that you've written and I mean, you've got a lot of life experience that I love to see now turned into products that you're making available to other people who didn't have the happy childhood that I had, that didn't grow up with the songs and the gotcha last games. And I can't tell you how many times I would feel a tap on my head and I turn around and there's nobody there. And I'm like, what just happened? And you'd be sneaking around and you'd tap us on the head. And then I don't know how you disappeared so fast, but you'd hide behind a door or something. You just brought joy to our day. And then we start looking around like I felt something. I know I did. Right. But it was a lot of gotcha last games and gotcha worst. And, just little tricks and fun things that were memorable, that brought joy to the day that could have just been an ordinary day of dissatisfaction or what have you. And little moments of brightness.
Yeah, you can create the world that you want to live in. There are lots of ways to do it. Another thing that kind of comes to mind this morning is everybody has problems in their life. Everybody has circumstances that are not ideal. And one of the secrets of being cheerful and happy is to focus on the solutions instead of the problems. Identify the problem and understand it, and then start working on a solution. and that will turn that thing from a real negative energy into a positive energy. And with things like YouTube and the how to things that you can learn, even if you have a problem with plumbing or carpentry or whatever it might be, we're surrounded by tutorials on how to do everything. If I see a guitar and I don't know how to play it, that's not a problem, that's an opportunity. And I can get on YouTube and have free guitar lessons or free accordion lessons or free piano, whatever it might be. I can learn how to solder and be a plumber, or I can learn how to make pottery. I mean, the things are endless, and there's so much information available to us, so many opportunities to do everything. Start looking at solutions instead of problems. It's really a powerful, impactful thing. And another thing is forgiveness. A lot of times we go through life and we hold grudges against people. For sometimes we'll hold a grudge against someone and they won't even know that the thing happened. It's just the way we perceive the situation. So there's no sense in trying to be cheerful if you're carrying around a lot of negative burdens. So learn to forgive people and let people. Everyone has a different belief system. Everyone does. And everyone perceives the world a little bit differently. So cut people some slack. Let them grow and develop and mature in ways that are beneficial to them. And you need to be non judgmental and tolerant and loving to them. You can bring things to their awareness, you can encourage them, but don't carry grudges, because it's really, really hard to be cheerful and happy if you're not forgiving people. So that's another key.
When you talk about forgiveness, it was easy for me to carry a grudge because I was waiting for the other person to apologize. And so for years I carried a grudge because I was justified, and it was for true a justifiable grudge, and I was going to wait for them to apologize and come to their senses. And I realized one day that it was not hurting them, but it was hurting me. And I read something that caught my attention. And what I read was this: go to the person who you are holding a grudge to and say to them, we've been carrying this grudge, or I've been carrying this grudge against you for a multiplicity of years, however long it has been. And through the last 10 or 15 years that I've been carrying this grudge, I matured a little bit and I grew up a little bit. And I would like to offer an apology. And it might only be one sided, but I'd like to put this behind me. And then let them know that you're releasing the grudge. They don't have to forgive you in exchange. If it was a two-way grudge, that's fine. They don't have to forgive you. But now you have released your grudge. You apologized. You made it right. You said, I've matured and I've grown up a little bit and I'm moving on. And in doing that, you release yourself from whatever the hate and the angst was that was such a two-way bind, or it was such a strong tie that you just cannot let go. And I was like, I'm going to try that. And I started going up to people going, look at me. I've matured. I've grown up a little bit and I'm moving on. And although it sounds really silly, it really was liberating, because I was then able to say, you know what, I just let go. I am not going to carry that grudge anymore. I just don't have the capacity for it, nor do I have the interest anymore. And in letting go, I was able to move on and just kind of release that burden. So yeah, talk about cheerfulness.
Yeah, that really helps. And another thing that comes to mind as you mention that is we should always engage in random acts of kindness and service. If we do things that people don't expect, giving someone a flower or just a compliment. If you go up to one of your workers and say, I'm so impressed with the job you did yesterday. You're a valuable person on my team, and I really appreciate working around you. Just a compliment like that can make someone's day, and it spreads the joy and the happiness that you're trying to cultivate. So if you go out of your way to be kind and you don't expect anything in return, acts of service to one of the things that we used to do was travel around to the old retirement centers where people were in those places where they assisted living things. And we used to take musical programs into them and sing to them and take them plates of cookies and hot homemade bread and different things like that. It just gives your life a different dimension because you're of service to people and you make them happy. And I think that's really important to do. Random acts of kindness.
What a great topic to end today's session on. Oh, this was great. I just love this time together. Thank you so much for joining me. For those of you that are just joining us, and for those of you that are watching the replay, we're talking to Omuugn on tips from the insights and wisdom of Omuugn. Today's topic was on cheerfulness, and next week we are talking on the topic of choices and decisions. So I hope that you'll pick up your copy if you have not already and bring your questions to next week's conversation. We're here every Saturday for just a little bit to share with you some of life's lessons that will help you live a life of impact. So thank you, Omuugn, for joining us today. And until we meet again, go out there and be the best version of you.